A killing intention appeared in Xiao Yan's eyes. In the blink of an eye, he crossed a distance of dozens of meters and appeared strangely in front of the Duwang elder of the demonic poison sect. At this moment, the latter suddenly reacted, realizing that Xiao Yan was not simple. His expression suddenly became distorted, and he wanted to take advantage of the situation to fight back. It was too late, but it was too late. Faced with the subconscious counterpunch from the elder of the demonic poison sect Dou Wang, Xiao Yan quietly thought about taking a step away from him and easily dodged it with just a slight difference. His expression did not change. Not even a single corner of his clothes was scratched. Instead, he once again deceived himself and came in front of the elder Dou Wang. Then, when a look of panic appeared in his eyes, he immediately punched out with a huge force mixed with surging fighting spirit. In full view of everyone, he punched the opponent. On top of the opponent's chest, a dull sound of fists and flesh appeared, followed by a brief silence. The next second, a crisp click sound sounded, and the elder of the demonic poison sect's face turned red, and he suddenly sprayed a large mouthful of blood came out, and the whole person was like a kite with its string broken. The whole person suddenly flew out, knocking down a large number of vendors along the way, flew more than 10 meters away, and finally hit a hard and thick wall. Deeply the inlay enters it. I have been practicing for such a long time to reach the king of fighting. I don't know where I can show my face. Xiao Yan put away his fist, spat at the elder of the demonic poison sect, clapped his hands, and looked around. Everyone who was still laughing at Xiao Yan suddenly became silent. Everyone seemed to have something stuck in their throats. Their eyes widened and their mouths opened, wanting to say something, but they couldn't hear any sound. The young man in black robe in front of him actually killed the demonic poison sect's Dou Wang elder with one punch. For a moment, this exciting news impacted everyone's minds, making them wonder if they were in a dream. However, when they looked back, they saw the body embedded in the wall, with only the air coming in and no air coming out. The elder Dou Wang of the demonic poison sect knew that this matter was actually true.
Right.
A disciple of the demonic poison sect reacted and shouted in a heartbreaking voice, his whole voice trembling. Even the fighting king-level elders were instantly killed with one punch, let alone their ordinary fighting spirits. Following his words, many disciples of the demonic poison sect reacted and tried to escape, but it was too late. Xiao Yan's lips moved slightly, and he said lightly. After the words fell, Xiao Yan tapped his foot again, as if he had traveled through space, leaving a faint afterimage and ripples of air in place. The next moment, he appeared in front of the disciples of the demonic poison sect. Following several dull sounds of fist-to-flesh fighting, the disciples of the demonic poison sect flew up out of thin air one after another. Their chests collapsed, and the light in their eyes disappeared. The moment they fell to the ground, they were no longer alive and fell into death. With one punch and one move, all members of the demonic poison sect were wiped out. In the auction house, countless poison masters from the Azumo Empire were stunned and dumbfounded. When they looked at Xiao Yan, they also had a look of disbelief and a touch of fear. They were obviously impressed by the strength displayed by the young man in front of them.
Xiao Yan one Jack man.
So quickly, I have to thank co sportsman the fact which the band circuit is the social security and newspaper file.
The little medical fairy stretched out her hand to lightly cover her red lips. Deep in her eyes, there was a look of shock. She originally thought that Xiao Yan's strength should be about the same as hers now, between the brothers, but she didn't expect that he would be so strong and kill everyone in the demonic poison sect easily. You must know that he has the poison body of disaster, and his cultivation has been improving rapidly. However, Xiao Yan does not have any special talent, so how can he improve so fast? It's true that a small witch can see a big witch. Regardless of what the many Izumo Empire poison masters present thought of him, after all the members of the demonic poison sect were eliminated, the murderous intent in Xiao Yan's eyes quietly disappeared. Then he stretched out his hand and took off the ring from the hand of the elder Dou Wang of the demonic poison sect. and the soul power penetrated into it. After discovering that there were some poisonous fighting skills and some poisons in the ring, he threw it to the little medical fairy with a smile. Here it is, there's a lot of stuff inside. It might be useful to you. The solemn look on Xiao Yan's face just now disappeared completely. He rubbed his hands, looked at the little medical fairy with a bit of a smile, pretended to be relaxed and came to her, and said, "Let's go. I take you to the auction house to see if you want anything, and I'll pay for it to celebrate our reunion, ally." The little fairy doctor just bought a 3-color poison ivy fruit before. Xiao Yan's soul power was always paying attention to the entire auction house, so she naturally knew about it. At that time, when she looked at some of the subsequent auction items, her expression changed. Xiao Yan did not miss the longings on his body. The current auction is not over yet. In addition, in the hands of the boss behind the auction house, there are still many treasured collections that you can buy, as long as you have money. But for Xiao Yan today, money is not money. Just throw in a few pills, and you can buy most of the auction house. In the hands of the little medical fairy, she tightly grasped the Nai ring of the demon poison sect elder that Xiao Yan had just thrown to her, and pressed it on her chest. She looked at Xiao Yan with a dreamy expression, as if she didn't react. After all, what happened just now was so dreamy that even a little medical fairy couldn't accept it for a while. When Xiao Yan saw her scene, he also scratched his head. And then he stepped forward, grabbed the little medical fairy's arm, pulled her, and walked towards the interior of the auction venue. By some strange coincidence, the little medical fairy didn't do anything. After reacting, she followed Xiao Yan and looked at his side face. A faint blush appeared on her cheeks that were covered by the gauze of her black robe. Hey! It's time to wake up, right?
I do house.
Xiao Yan stretched out his hand and waved it in front of the little medical fairy for a few times, with a little worry in his tone. This girl has been in a daze since just now, and she doesn't know what she is thinking. Now that the auction is over, Xiao Yan took a large amount of precious poison and stuffed it into the hands of the little medical fairy. Facing Xiao Yan, who was approaching, the little medical fairy came back to his senses. With a little panic and shame, he looked at the familiar and delicate face that was almost in front of him, pushed it away gently, and then looked at Had. Cullen was coming with her new. It turns out what just happened was not a dream. This Fairy girl is really worrying. Xiao Yan, who was pushed away, did not have any emotions. He looked at the little medical fairy who was dangling and pinched his arm, but he couldn't help but shook his head. However, the next second, he saw a few drops of blood in the eyes of the little medical fairy. Tears began to roll, and then fell down unsatisfactorily. Before Xiao Yan could say anything, the little medical fairy turned into a white silhouette, rushed towards Xiao Yan, hugged him deeply, and then buried his face on Xiao Yan's chest. Started sobbing quietly. Feeling the clothes soaked with tears on his chest, Xiao Yan also had a look of helplessness on his face, but he knew why the little medical fairy did what he did. He came to a strange country alone and wanted to develop himself, but he couldn't. Because of the accident, I was greatly wronged and could only strengthen myself alone. The feeling of being targeted by the whole world is always too bad. Let alone a girl like the little medical fairy, it would be uncomfortable even if a grown man comes here. Now, his sudden appearance has helped her solve the problem that has been pressing in her heart. Due to the heavy burden of life, emotions, and reasons, it is normal for the little medical fairy to have emotional outbursts. Without making a sound to stop, Xiao Yan raised an arm, and after a slight hesitation, he gently put it on the back of the little medical fairy, and took it into his arms, and the little medical fairy, feeling this scene, I cried even more intensely. Feeling the warmth and softness in front of him, Xiao Yan did not have any evil thoughts in his heart at this moment. Instead, he felt endless distress for the girl in front of him, his best friend. The two hugged each other for a long, long time.
Ma'am. Sorry, they're close.
After a long time, the little medical fairy's mood finally calmed down, but her pretty face couldn't help but blush. Thinking of her emotional outburst just now, she threw herself into Xiao Yan's arms and cried bitterly. His open-mindedness also feels a little unnatural.
Nothing.
Xiao Yan scratched his head, laughed, and revealed the matter, then turned his eyes away and looked elsewhere. Fortunately, after Xiao Yan entered the auction venue, the owner of the auction learned about Xiao Yan's ferocity in killing a fighting king with one punch outside, and arranged a separate private room for him. Only the two of them were here. If it was in the hall below, I'm afraid that the little medical fairy's sense of shame will become even worse. Agus may free starts. Some premeditated. Haha, I'm not like you. You can improve your cultivation even if you eat something. Everything I have is achieved through my own efforts. Faced with the little medical fairy's question, Xiao Yan smiled and shook his head before replying. Hearing this answer, the little medical fairy was not surprised. Recalling the various times she had experienced in the Misty Valley, she said with a little sigh, "Yes, you practice so hard, but even if you work hard, you can't become so powerful at this age." The little medical fairy nodded first and then shook his head, but Xiao Yan was naturally non-committal about all this. He couldn't just go to Zhang Yang and tell him that he was back from the future when he saw an acquaintance, right? Okay, we have stayed here long enough. People outside are probably impatient. Changing the topic with a chuckle, Xiao Yan jumped up from the soft sofa, and the little medical fairy who looked at him pursed his lips slightly and followed him quietly. After receiving the auction items, he declined the invitation from the boss behind the auction venue to meet. Xiao Yan took away the auction items and left the auction with the little fairy doctor. Soon, the two came to Black Mist City, which was the largest city within 100 miles and the most luxurious city. Xiao Yan planned to take the little medical fairy with him and let him rest here. After all, the little medical fairy has been hunted for such a long time, and I'm afraid she won't be able to rest well at all. However, shortly after they entered the city, a gurgling sound did come from Xiao Yan's stomach, making the latter look slightly embarrassed.
I'm a little hungry. It's been a long time since I've eaten something you made.
After hearing Xiao Yan's slightly sighing words, the little medical fairy also recalled all the things they experienced when they lived together in the Misty Valley. Whenever she thinks of those memories, she is no longer the famous poison master, but the little medical fairy she once was. Well, then I'll do it for you, right now. The corners of her mouth were slightly raised, and the little medical fairy said gently with a slightly relaxed look on her face under the gauze. Unfa. No matter what happens, everyone in the world will feel fear and panic towards the poisonous body of the little medical fairy.
Biendewa.
So this?
Dorianogo. Varansta side of this.
Disturbing off and submihat the soul?
Then if mus.
So. But Xiao Yan is the only one who doesn't care about this like others. Now that things have happened, I am afraid that Xiao Yan is the only one in the world who dares to eat the food made by her own hands. Just like in the past, the two first found an inconspicuous residential house, paid the rent, and moved into it. The little fairy doctor started to light a fire and cook food just like he did in the Misty Valley of the Warcraft Mountains in the past. Xiao Yan put his hands behind his head, acting as a cushion, lying on the roof of the wooden house, quietly waiting for the passage of time. About half an hour later, the little medical fairy prepared a sumptuous meal. All the food she had cooked for Xiao Yan appeared on the table, and the familiar but slightly unfamiliar sound of the sound appeared. Xiao Yan also moved his index finger and started to cook immediately. After going back and forth, the two of them actually ate all the food on the large table, leaving nothing at all. Just when Xiao Yan was leaning on the recliner and picking his teeth with a toothpick, the little medical fairy who had finished clearing the table suddenly spoke in a low voice and aided in secret. If you left, he great dista pros. After hearing the little medical fairy's inquiry, Xiao Yan paused for a moment, and then he spoke quietly and said, "In general, there are many reasons, but the most important reason is very simple." "What is that?" the little medical fairy asked while washing the dishes. After Xiao Yan heard these words, he sat up without any hesitation, looked at the little medical fairy calmly, and then said,
Nothing. I just want to come and see you.
Hearing these words, the little medical fairy's hands that were still washing the dishes suddenly trembled, and she almost fell to the ground. She couldn't speak for a while, but from Xiao Yan's perspective, it could be seen that on her cheeks, slightly red. That's right. Didn't you say before that there was still something important to do? Is it done now? The little medical fairy changed the topic with a trembling voice, and Xiao Yan nodded when he heard this, and said with a little emotion in his eyes, Well, it's all over, very smooth. Xiao Yan naturally knew what the little medical fairy was asking him about, and a melancholy emotion immediately emerged in his heart. Recalling all the things that happened in the Jiama Empire before, it was vivid in my mind, and I felt a little tired. Since I separated from you, I went directly to Blackrock City. Recalling these slightly distant memories, Xiao Yan also felt a little dazed. Looking back, several years have passed since that time. Shaking his head slightly, he gave a brief account of what happened during the time when he and the little medical fairy were separated, and at the same time concealed some key things, such as the existence of Yao Lao and his previous life, memories of a lifetime and stuff like that. It hasn't been easy for you these past few years, but it sounds pretty exciting. The little medical fairy listened quietly to Xiao Yan's words, with a little envy and expectation deep in his eyes. When Xiao Yan saw this, he just shrugged and replied casually, Dangers and opportunities coexist. Apart from my own hard work, luck is also a very important factor in my achievements today. The two communicated again for a while, until the sky gradually darkened, the sun set, and the reflection of the old dead vines and trees remained. Soon, the sun completely set on the top of the mountain, and the night sky covered the sky like a curtain. Because the weather was okay and cloudless, the stars in the sky were arranged dots on it, constantly twinkling and looking extremely gorgeous. Even the most special silver moon, under the sky full of stars, was deprived of a large number of viewers and seemed to be overshadowed. The boy and the girl leaned together. The boy in black robe put his hands behind his head and leaned against the thatched roof with a piece of dog tail in his mouth. The girl in plain white dress hugged her legs, slightly showing, looking absent-mindedly towards the sky. The two of them were so familiar yet unfamiliar, admiring the starry sky for the first time in a long time. After a long time, Xiao Yan, who was holding a dog's tail grass in his mouth, may have felt a little bored. He turned his head and looked at the girl in white next to you, and suddenly said, What are your plans next, Lefibio? I want to stay in the Izumo Empire at Shou. The little medical fairy hesitated for a moment, and then replied in a low voice. She also knows her own physique very well. In the eyes of some people, it is synonymous with disaster. Because of this, it is difficult for her to have friends, so the little medical fairy also attaches great importance to Xiao Yan, her only friend, and he will not stay in the Izumo Empire for a long time. At the thought of being separated again after a brief goodbye, the little medical fairy couldn't help but cover her chest, and a strange feeling began to brew there. Little medical fairy, do you want to stay here to find a way to solve the hidden dangers of your poisonous body in the Izumo Empire, a country where poison masters are rampant? Xiao Yan stared at the bright eyes of the little medical fairy and spoke calmly without hiding anything. You know everything. Hearing Xiao Yan's words, the little medical fairy was slightly surprised. But she was not surprised, because when she was in the Misty Valley, Xiao Yan had read the 7-colored poison sutra when the little medical fairy was unconscious after swallowing poison for the first time, and learned about the disadvantages of the Ernan poison body. Actually, there's no need to make it so troublesome. Xiao Yan sat up slowly, without moving his eyes away from the little medical fairy, but continued to say to the little medical fairy, with a somewhat unclear meaning, If I say that I can solve the hidden danger of the evil body, can you come with me? He had no intention of hiding it, but when the little medical fairy heard Xiao Yan's words, he was startled for a moment, and then suddenly became excited, and even a trace of emotion appeared on his gentle face. Unconcealable joy. You know, since she was born, she has been tortured by the evil body. She has been looking for the reason and became a doctor. The original idea was to cure herself. Later, she was lucky enough to get the 7-colored poison sutra. Because of this, the little medical fairy knew what her constitution was and what it meant. Because of this, she stepped from one abyss into another, called despair. Originally, there was little hope, and the little medical fairy never expected that one day he would be able to find a solution to the hidden dangers of the disaster poison body. However, the appearance of Xiao Yan broke the shackles of despair. The little medical fairy's voice was trembling slightly. Xiao Yan, seeing her like this, did not speak, but nodded heavily. Since the two met, Xiao Yan had never deceived the little medical fairy, and then he always believed in him. If we can solve the hidden danger of the evil body, I don't want to stay here anymore. After a while, the little medical fairy who recovered from the excitement said bluntly that if the hidden danger came into contact, then she would change from the little poisonous girl who was feared by everyone back to a normal person. How could she think about staying in the Izumo Empire? This kind of chaos is comparable to a country in the Black Corner territory. After hearing the little medical fairy's answer, Xiao Yan raised the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing a faint smile. He then lay back down again and said with a hint of a smile, "Well, after I finish handling some other matters in the Izumo Empire, I will prepare to help you find materials to solve the hidden dangers of the Unami poison body." Not surprisingly, the little medical fairy agreed to Xiao Yan's request, and because of this, the latter put down a stone in his heart and suddenly felt a lot more relaxed. Only after the most important thing in the Izumo Empire was accomplished, Xiao Yan could, in the mood to think about what's next. After hearing this, the little medical fairy was aroused a lot of curiosity, and his bright eyes blinked, filled with a little confusion. Isn't it the first time for Xiao Yan to come to the Izumo Empire? So what will he have to deal with? With these curious emotions, the little medical fairy subconsciously asked Reprenigros.
What are you dealing with?
After hearing her words, Xiao Yan didn't mean to hide anything. Instead, he spread his hands and told her directly, saying, "First of all, it's the demonic poison sect. This time it's just some minions. Those who have tried to harm you, I won't let go of any of them. After I deal with the demonic poison sect, I will go to the 10,000 Scorpions Mountain. Meet old friends." When he said the words old friend, Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed slightly unconsciously, and a faint cold light flashed through them, mixed with a hint of well-concealed murderous intent. Hearing that Xiao Yan was going to the demonic poison sect to take revenge for himself, the little medical fairy once again felt moved in his heart. But when Xiao Yan mentioned 10,000 Scorpions Mountain, her expression couldn't help but change slightly. 10,000 Scorpions Mountain is the headquarters of the 10,000 Scorpions sect, a once-established sect in the Izumo Empire. Although the influence of the 10,000 Scorpion sect has gradually weakened over the past decade or so, some truly strong men in the Izumo Empire know that the 10,000 Scorpions sect is the strongest sect in the Izumo Empire. The little medical fairy only found out about this news by chance, and she had a little understanding of this secretive sect. However, just getting a glimpse of it frightened her. Even the demonic poison sect, who was chasing her to the sky and into the earth, unable to breathe, compared with the 10,000 Scorpion sect, it was just a comparison between a child and an adult. Among them were not only dust sect-level figures, but also the current sect leader. They are all at the peak of Da Huang. There are countless Da Huangs and Da Wang elders in the sect. When he thought that what Xiao Yan was dealing with involved the most powerful sect in the Izumo Empire, the little medical fairy's eyes were full of confusion and shock. There are some things that I will explain to you later. Let's go to the Demon Poison Sect headquarters tomorrow. Faced with the little medical fairy's doubts, Xiao Yan naturally knew it, but he didn't explain too much. It was still the same sentence. After all, he couldn't say Wan Scorpion Sect will have enmity with me in the future, right? Faced with Xiao Yan's pushback, the little medical fairy also expressed his understanding. After all, everyone has their own secrets, and it's okay not to share them with others. After chatting for a while, towards midnight, the two of them also felt a little tired, so they returned to the thatched hut and began to rest. This night was the most peaceful sleep the little medical fairy had in a while. Before, he had been trying his best to avoid being chased every day, and he also had to worry about his identity being discovered. In addition, he also had to work hard to improve his cultivation and find the poison needed to cure Fernand's poisonous body. He was very exhausted physically and mentally. Now, with Xiao Yan by her side, she can finally rest peacefully. Twitter. Accompanied by the chirping of sparrows, soon the first ray of light from the early morning penetrated the slightly thin mist, awakening all things on the earth. After breakfast, the two of them stood in the middle of the courtyard. Xiao Yan was going to take the little medical fairy to the headquarters of the demonic poison sect to ask for an explanation, not to mention anything else. After he found out that the one who was chasing the little medical immortal was the demonic poison sect, he collected all the information about this sect in a very short period of time. Is a king with the Energetwitland. Is a pain though chill thereby, is canding yes but hit the edge go with visitations. The little medical fairy said with a bit of regret. Xiao Yan was the giant blue eagle and also the little medical fairy's good friend of Warcraft, but it lived in the Warcraft mountains and could not follow him.
Haha, it doesn't matter.
Xiao Yan chuckled, and then gently hugged the little medical fairy's slender waist. The latter also shook slightly, and allowed Xiao Yan to move. Status in brother Xiao Yan's heart is also very important. In this case, he cannot be sorry for him, both emotionally and rationally. Taking a deep breath, regardless of the slight changes in the faces of the black destroyers around him, Sunar immediately looked at Xiao Yan solemnly, then covered the ancient jade to his chest and said. As Xiao Yan's words fell, the next second he took a step forward. His clothes moved automatically without wind, and he stepped into the sky out of thin air. Standing upright, after briefly identifying their direction in the sky, the two of them turned into a stream of light and flew towards the sky. Soon they turned into a small black dot and disappeared into the sky. The Blackwater Mountains are a famous continuous mountain range in the Izumo Empire. They are full of towering black giant peaks. On top of the tallest mountain in the Blackwater Mountains is the headquarters of the demonic poison sect. At this moment, there are figures stirring in the demonic poison sect's meeting hall. An old man with a somewhat gloomy look held a letter in his hand. After a long time, he snorted coldly and said solemnly, That little poisonous girl is lucky, but who is this guy who calls himself Xiao Yan Lek? On the other side, another bald man with an aura about the level of Du Wang said, somewhat casually,
Haha, Lao Wu, you are in trouble this time, and you also killed an elder of the sect's fighting king.
I want you to look good when the sect master comes out of seclusion. The old man, who was squeezed by the bald man, his face became more and more gloomy. He snorted coldly and said immediately, without arguing with him,
No matter what, the Xiaoyan will be on the wanted list.
If he dares to protect that little poisonous girl, there must be some unknown relationship between the two. Although the Izumo Empire is extremely vast and the major cities are very far apart due to the terrain, at Xiao Yan's current speed, it only takes about an hour to cross most of the Izumo Empire. Carrying the little medical fairy came to the sky above the demonic poison sect. Looking down, I saw that a large piece of the towering mountain had been cut off artificially, making it appear extremely flat. And just on the flat ground, there were many ancient and simple buildings standing, which looked very charming. In the center of the rows of houses, there is an extremely large square, covering an area of Hastings, Kaviais. Ether Steinbesen Strumling after Horis. Above it are disciples in groups of three sitting cross-legged and practicing. In the center of the square, there is The stone tablet is 7 to 8 feet tall, with 3 large blood-red characters engraved on it. Demon Poison Sect! Turning his head sideways, he gently squeezed the little medical fairy's palm. Xiao Yan took a deep breath, then turned his gaze downwards and shouted coldly, Hand over everyone who has persecuted the little medical fairy, otherwise I will destroy the entire sect. The sound was like rolling thunder, spreading under the action of fighting spirit, and instantly enveloped the entire mountain. Mixed with deep anger, even the entire mountain peak was trembling. And just a few seconds after Xiao Yan made a sound, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the demonic poison sect, facing Xiao Yan from a distance. Judging from its aura, it turned out that there was an 8-star Dou Huang around. Judging from his face, Mo was about middle-aged, wearing a green robe. He was clearly the leader of the demonic poison sect Old Monster Hua and one of the powerful men with a reputation throughout the Izumo Empire. It's just that at this moment, he no longer looked so calm. Instead, he looked extremely frightened and uneasy, just because the two figures in front of him, especially the young man in black robe, were so relaxed without relying on their fighting spirit wings, set foot high in the sky. The strong man of Duzong, Old Monster, whose pupils tightened, and there was a touch of bitterness in his heart, but he still quickly raised his hands and said to the young man in black robe in front of him with a little fear, "You don't know what your demonic poison sect has done." Xiao Yan immediately snorted coldly, without giving any face to Old Monster Hua. Instead, he closed his eyes slightly and said calmly, "From now on, within the time of a stick of incense, hand over all the people who participated in the pursuit of the little medical fairy. And the gate row is need. Otherwise, there is no need for the demonic poison sect to exist."